Hi, everyone. Sorry for the delay. I had to update, of course. Always happens when you are not expecting it. Let me grab PowerPoint. I hope everyone's doing well today. Good morning, Beatrice. Morning, Ben. Shivanji, good morning. Diksha, wow, it's going too fast. Ahmed, Ming, Netta. I'm good, Netta. How you doing, Netta? Hi, Brittany. Let's see. Well, I guess let me pull up the syllabus first. Nicole, Mohammed, wow, everybody's awake. That's good. That makes one of us. All right, hold on. I want to pull up the syllabus to see like where we even are at. I know today on the syllabus, I think it says TBD, and I said last time we're going to jump right into the angiosperms. Let me just look here real quick. All right, what day? Today is the 6th. Yes, good. Okay, we did it right. Last time we did the virtual field trip, which went okay. Today we're going to start the angiosperms. And your lecture exam 2 is in 1 week from today, 1 week from today. So there is a study guide that's on Blackboard already. It's been up there since the 1st. So hopefully you guys are working on that. The lecture exam does not cover angiosperms. Angiosperms are all going to be covered on the last lecture exam. So that's nice because now I'll pull up the lecture. That's nice because the last lecture exam covers the least amount of material, right? Just the angiosperms. And so that's nice. I've for those of you that have met with me one-on-one about your first exam, I told you that that first exam is the hardest exam of the course, and the exams get easier as we go, with the last exam being the easiest exam because it only covers the angiosperms and some core concepts, right? All right, enough housekeeping here. Let me pull this up. Thank you all for saying good morning. If I didn't catch you when you were flying by here, Sophia, Richard, Miriam, Roseman. Yes, thank you all for saying good morning. That's nice. Okay, let's see. Oops. Okay, let me share the angiosperms part 1. I don't know if we're gonna get through this completely today. I'm gonna try. Let's make this big. And it's okay if we don't, because we still have, you know, a lot of time to do the angiosperms, but at least want to start it today because I'm trying to get, at the end of the course, there's a couple days, one of which is called Plants and People on the syllabus, and another day which is about urban plants and jobs that people can have with working with plants. And so what I'm trying to do is get special guests to come speak with us for those classes. So I'm still working on that. But because of that, I want to move forward with the angiosperms just to make sure we have time for that, because it'll be fun. Should be a fun format. Okay, all right. So next exam is a week from today. Study guide is on Blackboard. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns about that, please email me. My family was in town the last few days, so I might be a little bit behind on emails. If you have already emailed me, I'm going to catch up today and tomorrow. And today we're going to finally start the angiosperms. Oh my God, the last part of the whole course, the last section of the entire course, angiosperms. We made it. We're going to talk about the flowering plants, which are the angiosperms, which are in the phylum Magnoliophyta. And we'll talk about what they look like, or their form, aka their habits. We'll talk about where they live, aka their habitats. Overall form, that's kind of habits anyways. But maybe that means also like parts of them. And then we will talk about the flower. We finally got to the flower. Right, so just so we get oriented, we have left the gymnosperms behind, finished those off last class, and now we are in that last station stop, the angiosperms. We've seen this slide many times already, but as a reminder, most of the plants on Earth are in the angiosperms, and furthermore, well, so most of the plants on Earth make seeds, right? Make seeds. Because the seed is a great evolutionary leap. Well, the ovule and the seed are a great evolutionary leap for plants, meaning when plants did finally have ovules and seeds, that system worked so well for plants that the majority of plants on Earth have that system. So we've seen this chart many times, but the green part on this is showing you all the seed plants, right? Compared to the rest of the plants, right? So there's over 370,000 known seed plants on Earth that are living. But within those seed plants, of those 370-ish thousand, the majority of those are flowering plants. So the majority of plants on Earth are flowering plants. And that makes sense, right? Because when you think about a plant, most of the time you probably think about a flower, right? Like if you have a child and you tell your child, please draw a plant, right? Most likely they will put a flower on it, maybe, but most of the time probably, right? Because we think about flowers and plants. We think about that as being a connected thing, and that's because the majority of plants that live on Earth make ovules and later seeds that are with flowers, right? Right. They make ovules inside of flowers and later seeds inside of fruits, right? Right. Okay. We already know gymnosperm means naked seed. We already know that, right? So, but just so we're clear, in the gymnosperms, the ovules and later the seeds are not enclosed in anything. And specifically, they're not enclosed in what's called an ovary. Instead, in the gymnosperms, ovules and seeds are visible and exposed to the environment. So if you're walking around and you see a conifer, or you see a cycad, or you see a ginkgo, right? And you look at it and it has ovules, you'll be able to see those ovules with your naked eye because they're not inside of anything. And likewise, once their ovules get fertilized and they turn into seeds, you'll be able to see those seeds with the naked eye. That's not the same thing. Oh, wait, here's to remind you what those things are, right? We have cycads on the left, and so this two on the left, good refresh slide, right? This is a cycad leaf that has ovules on it, right? This is a megasporophyll leaf. So this cycad would have come from a species with a fertile crown, crown of fertile leaves, right? But the point is, you can see the ovules with your eye. Here they are. Here's one, right? You can see them with your eye. They're not inside of anything. Next to that, you have another cycad leaf, another megasporophyll. This cycad leaf probably is part of a strobilus because it's really small and not green. But you can see the ovules with the naked eye. Here's one. Here's one. Not inside of anything. Here's our ovules on ginkgo. Naked. And here's our ovules in conifers on a cone. And sometimes if the cone is still developing, it may be hard to see the ovules. But the point is that they are exposed. They're not inside of any structure. But when we get to the angiosperms, this is different now. Angiosperm come from the Greek angion. Angion means a vessel or a container. And sperma still means seed. So it's a seed in a vessel or a seed inside of a container, a seed inside of a structure. And so therefore in angiosperms, the ovules, and later the seeds are enclosed in an ovary, so not exposed to the environment, protected. And this is why majority of plants that live on Earth are angiosperms, because angiosperms provide even better protection to the ovule and the ovule's egg. And then once that egg is fertilized and is an embryo, provides better protection to the developing embryo. So it's better. More protection is better. Here is a side-by-side comparison of what I'm talking about. So let's I'll use black. So on the left, you have a gymnosperm. And this whole thing is the ovule, right? We see the parts of the ovule that we've already learned about, right? There's a hole called the micropyle where where pollen grains can enter. There's a layer of protection, sometimes multiple layers of protection, depending on what plant you're talking about, called the integument, kind of surrounds everything. And inside of the megaspore, inside of the megasporangium, aka nucellus, is a spore mother cell or megasporocyte that's going to grow into a megaspore with the gametophyte plant, right? But either way, the point is exposed. This ovule is not inside of anything. It's just out. It's exposed. But look at the ovule of angiosperms. Here's that same ovule. That is a horrible. I can't do this. Just save my life. Here's another ovule, and look, it's inside of a new structure. It's called the ovary. And so look, even just visually, you can see how much better protected the angiosperm ovules are, right? Because it's inside of something. It's inside of something. Alrighty. All right. So angiosperms, right? The phylum for angiosperm is Magnoliophyta. Magnoliophyta. Sometimes you may see Anthophyta in certain books, or maybe even in the lab, it might be there. But for the purposes of this class, we're going with Magnoliophyta, okay? The reason why we have that word Magnoliophyta is because of this plant called a magnolia. And actually this time of year is a great time to see magnolia trees in flower. So who knows, maybe for one of your phenology assignments, maybe you were photographing a magnolia tree or shrub, and recently you might have seen really beautiful flowers emerge, or they will be emerging very soon. So that's where we get the name, because of this plant genus called Magnolia. But for the flowering plants, phylum Magnoliophyta, all members of flowering plants, all members bear or make or carry flowers, all members. So if you are in the flowering plants, you make flowers. Sometimes the flowers may not look like flowers. Sometimes the flowers may be very small and appear like another structure, but all members make flowers. Yes, we already went over that many times, the thing on the bottom. So we'll move on. Okay, tons of diversity. Wow, I mean, there's over 360 over 360,000 flowering plants. And so because of that, there's a ton of flower diversity, right? You already probably know that, even if you've gone to your grocery store and have seen cut flowers, or maybe you've gone shopping at Home Depot and seen the plant section, or maybe you've gone to a nursery to buy flowers. The point is, or maybe you're from a country that has a lot of really pretty flowers. There's a ton of flower diversity in the angiosperms. I mean, all colors, all sizes, different smells, different shapes, very, very diverse. So this slide probably looks familiar. We've kind of come across this slide before when we've talked about significant milestones in the plant kingdom and how that's affected other organisms, right? So here you see flowering plants show up around 130 million years ago, give or take. I don't think here, just as a reminder, you can see the first seed plants appear much, much longer ago. Oh, Ben is saying Ben's photographing a magnolia, but it's a southern magnolia, so it hasn't bloomed yet. Well, you have something to look forward to then, because it should be pretty soon, I hope. Yeah, so here just to give us some perspective about evolutionary time and the development of flower, right? Look, so first seed plants appear about, almost 400 million years ago, based on the fossil record. That's a long time ago. That's a long time ago. Whereas the first flowering plants show up about 130 million years ago. This is why I make a big deal about how a cycad is not a palm. Because even though a cycad looks like a palm, a cycad came about over 300 million years ago, whereas a palm came out, closer to 100 to 130 million years ago. So not even close. I mean, even just think about that in evolutionary, just think about even think about 1 million years or 2 million years, right? It's almost unfathomable to think about that amount of time. So that's why I make such a big deal, because that's a huge amount of time had to go by before we got to something like a palm. I'm getting distracted. What I'm trying to get at here is that the flowering plants show up around 130 million years ago. And likewise, we see around that time great diversification in the animal kingdom as well. So look here, we say about 130 million years ago, right? There's the flowering plants. So we start to see reptiles that maybe are going to move out of the sea, right? And ultimately end up with things that maybe look like this. But then very soon after, soon, relatively speaking, right? But like 30 million to 50 million years after the first flowering plants show up, then we start to see things like the very first mammals, like us, right? We're mammals. My husband is creeping in, trying to be very quiet. What do you need? They're right there. Yeah. Bye. All right, yeah. So as the flower, when flowers show up, animals get more diverse, right? Animals get more diverse. And so what that's going to do, it's going to have a feedback system, because plants have flowers on them. Flowers are going to attract different things to the flower depending on that. They're going to develop into different fruits. And then you're going to have the selection, the natural selection of animals consuming these fruits or consuming the parts of flowers. And so then we start to have this feedback system, more diversification of plants and more diversification of animals happening in real time. All right, what is a flower, right? What is a flower? So we said that everything in the flowering plants has a flower, but we have to know what it is to even kind of understand it all. So flower is a specialized shoot system whose leaves have become modified for reproduction over evolutionary time, right? Over evolutionary time. And there are sexual reproductive structures on flowers, and they're in certain structures, male structures and female structures. The male structures are called androcium, and the female structures are called gynocium. If you don't like those words, you can use the more simple stamens and carpels. So stamens and carpels are fine, and on an exam or anything like that, I would have both, right? So I would say androecium, stamens, gynocium, carpels on any exam. So whichever you prefer. Flowering plants, so this is about their habitats, right? So flowering plants are basically the most dominant type of plant around the world. So 366,000 of them, sorry, 366,000 of those plants. That makes there's a lot of places for them to live, and they do. They're the most dominant type of plant in almost every ecosystem on Earth. There is one exception, though, which we learned about in the conifers, that circumboreal forest. Oh, did I say, whoops, which we learned about in another lecture. But yeah, so the only place on Earth where angiosperms are not the most dominant plant is in the circumboreal forest, where it is those conifers. Oops, see, my little window here blocked that I was going to ask that question. Oh well, the answer is conifers. We learned about this in the very first class in January, which might seem like eons ago, but it's really not. But it does seem like a long time ago. That angiosperms are the plants that feed the world. All of those plants that we talked about in the very first class, right? Corn, wheat, rice, staples of civilization that come from grasses. Grasses are angiosperms, and so we wouldn't have civilization as we know it were it not for the angiosperms, because we eat them. The majority of things that we eat from plants are angiosperms. Right? These are slides from that very first class. So we learned the grasses, right? We learned about these grasses, corn, wheat, and rice that we consume. But obviously, there's a ton of other things that we consume as well that come from angiosperms. So fruits, obviously, vegetables, oils, herbs, spices, you name it, we eat it from angiosperm. You name it, we eat it. Oh, here, this is the fun fact. Let's see. Yeah, okay, just so you know, because I get this question sometimes. Oh, I have a question in chat box. Oh boy, yeah. I get this question sometimes, right, about fruits and vegetables, right? Oh, I guess black's not a good thing to use. Fruits versus vegetables. So maybe I don't know, maybe you've seen something online where somebody's like, oh, like tomatoes a vegetable, tomatoes a fruit, tomatoes a vegetable, or whatever it is. Or people making big deals out of like, what's a vegetable, what's not a vegetable. I'll make it easy for you. For botanically speaking, I'll make it easy for you. If it has a seed in it, or if it's supposed to have a seed in it, it is a fruit, right? It is a fruit. For example, like a bell pepper is a fruit. A tomato is a fruit. A zucchini is a fruit. Anything that has a seed or should have a seed in it is a fruit. Fruits are things that came from a flower. So there was a flower at some point, and then it turned into a fruit. So you might say, well, then what's a vegetable, Rebecca? If you're telling me a bell pepper is a fruit, what's a vegetable? Vegetables are things like lettuce or asparagus or Brussels sprout or garlic, things like that. So sometimes people are like, what? But yes, if it has a seed in it, it is a fruit. It has a seed in it, it's a fruit. Olive is a fruit. Peanut is a fruit. Okay, moving on. Yes, so we eat them and use them for cooking. We build structures out of them, which is useful. Super useful. Thank you, angiosperms. We use them for everything, guys. We use them for everything. We make clothes out of them. We make dyes out of them. We heat our homes with them. and use them as fuel for cooking. We make beer and wine and other alcohols out of them, medicine, drugs, flowers, and more. So Taser's asking, so cucumber is a fruit? Yes, yes it is, because it has seeds in it. So yep, squash is a fruit. What other things can I say that are, yeah, cucumber is a fruit because it has seeds in it. Yep, green onion, not a fruit, vegetable, right? Rhubarb, not a fruit, vegetable. Yep, I know, right? Wow, Rebecca, never thought that it was going to be so like, what? You're changing my whole perspective on life. All right, so we learned about where they are in the world and the evolutionary significance of having angiosperms to both humans and other animals. Now let's talk about kind of what their form is. So there's angiosperms. Any plant form that exists, angiosperms have it. They have it. So for example, herbs or herbaceous plants. So when you see something called an herb, it just means that it's non-woody. And because you're becoming plant experts, now if you see this non-woody, bells should be going off, right? If you're non-woody, it means you lack wood, and wood is secondary xylem. So if you're a herbaceous plant, it means that you're a plant that does not make secondary xylem, and therefore your secondary growth is going to be pretty limited, right? You're mostly going to be doing primary growth. Things that you can think of are things that are like annual species, right? Things that only grow for one season. A lot of these little annual species, they don't really need to make secondary structures because they're only going to be around for a year. So they just usually make primary growth. So we got herbs. Question, so how are lavender and rosemary categorized since they're woody-ish? So I guess you could think of like percentage. So it's more that, yeah, like I would say that those things could be a shrub. Like a lavender and rosemary, I would more think of like a shrub because they are capable of making like wood to some extent. When I'm saying herbaceous, I'm more talking about things like a lily or a snapdragon, or, you know, fleshy things. It's very, let's put it this way. If you could mow it over with your lawnmower, right? And just kind of zip, it's probably an herb. But yeah, when I say the word herb here, I'm not referring to like a culinary herb, like an herb that you eat with for your meal. I'm saying herbaceous, meaning non-woody, a non-woody thing. So since lavender and rosemary have some wood, I'd probably think of them as a shrub, small shrub. Yeah. Okay, so angiosperms can be herb or herbaceous, right? Obviously been like, there's a gradient here, right? Like some stuff's going to be completely fleshy, like green grass, and some stuff is going to be, okay, sorry, I'm getting carried away. Yeah, there's a gradient, right? There's 366,000 plants. So some of them are going to fall in between these categories. All right, shrubs. So here you go, shrubs, like rosemary or lavender. So herb, shrubs. Shrubs are small woody things. Trees are larger woody things. And then vines, so these are different types of habits. Vines, and which are also called lianas. Just to clarify, right? Shrubs, trees, and lianas are woody. They have secondary xylem. But so woody vines are lianas. I could go back here, right? So you see this woody vine on this tree. Is it called a liana? Like poison ivy is a woody vine, right? So we could also call that a liana. What other types of habits? Well, there's also epiphytes, as you can see here in these little orchids growing on this tree, right? Epiphyte, which means, what does an epiphyte mean? Been a minute since we've seen that term because we were talking about the gymnosperms. Grows on other plants, yes, grows on other plants. So angiosperms can be epiphytes. Angiosperms can grow in water as aquatic plants, like these water lilies. And as parasitic plants. The parasitic plants are super cool in that they lack the ability to have, they don't have chlorophyll. They don't have chlorophyll, and so they're therefore cannot make their own food, right? Because they can't do photosynthesis without chlorophyll. And so what they do instead is they have these special roots that allow that the roots grow into other plants and steal the food from other plants, right? So these are called parasitic plants. Usually when you encounter them in the wild, they may not even look kind of like a plant because they usually are not green, obviously, and can be all different types of colors. Here is one example that you might encounter if you're walking around the woods in Jersey and New York, is the ghost pipe or ghost plant. So this might look like a mushroom, but it's not. This is actually a type of plant. You can see how it lacks that green pigment, right? It's completely white. And so it will be using special roots to steal nutrients from other plants. So habitats, epiphyte, aquatic, parasites. Oh, here you go. This is an example of a parasitic plant, this corpse lily. So on Earth right now, this is the largest single flower on Earth right now. May have seen it before, maybe in a magazine. It shows up sometimes. People like to highlight it because it is pretty cool. It can get huge. I mean, like this one flower is like, I can't even make how big it is. Ow. And also I got the vaccine yesterday, so my arm is a little sore. But yay, vaccine. Sorry. Yeah, so corpse lily, it's called corpse lily because it smells like rotting flesh. And this is actually fly pollinated. All right, where do they live? Well, we already said that plants, angiosperms, live everywhere and dominate most ecosystems. Yeah, Vivian said, ew, about the corpse lily. Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, hey, it works. It works for this plant, but yeah, it smells horrible. It smells like rotting flesh, and that attracts flies to it, and the flies pollinate the flower. Nature. Okay, so here's where do they live? They live everywhere. They dominate everywhere except the circumboreal forests. But here you go, temperate and tropical forests. Habitats also include dry environments like deserts or sand dunes, grasslands and savannas, right, which are becoming more and more threatened, these types of ecosystems on Earth, due to things like farming, climate change. Also, look at this little guy. Hi. Sorry. Oh, there's a duck outside my window yelling right now, ironically. Where else? Alpine regions, which means like in the mountains. Look at all those beautiful alpine plants growing there. Freshwater environments, saltwater environments, everywhere. They grow everywhere. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the actual plants now, right? So we already know we're in the vascular plants, guys. So we already know that the sporophyte generation is dominant and long-lived. We already know that. We already know it has true roots. We already know it has true stems and leaves. This is like old news. We've encountered some of these terms before. Actually, I think on this slide, every word we've already encountered, but we will encounter some new terms today because we're talking about flowering plants. But look, you see here, you got your shoot system and your root system. Shoot system is like your leaves and stems. Look, this is kind of summary parts of a leaf, petiole, blade, right? Apical buds at the tips, growing for primary growth. Nice summary slide. Nodes and internodes. Here's a nodes, internode. Axillary buds, right, which are in the axil of the leaf. Here's the axil of the leaf. Remember I mentioned that before. Here's the axil of the leaf, and there's that axillary bud, right? So that's your shoot system. Oops. And you got your root system below. In this case, this diagram is showing you taproot system, but not all flowering plants have that type. There's other types. Right. Oh, look at that. See? This is kind of a refresh. Look, we're gonna, sorry, not to make you dizzy, right? Nodes and internodes, parts of a leaf, axillary bud, and then what we're gonna do now is we're going to zoom in on an apical bud. We're gonna zoom in on an apical bud at the tip, right? So here we go. This is a good slide to refer to when you're doing the angiosperm lab, FYI. But apical buds are where you're going to have primary growth occur at the apical buds that are at the tips of the shoots and also the tips of the roots. Here we see an apical bud at the tip of a shoot, right? And this is where you're going to have those primary structures develop. So here you go. Look, apical meristem is located right here. And as that apical meristem divides and grows new tissues, there's going to be the different, remember the apical meristem makes 3 primary meristems, right? Which we can see here as well. Protoderm, procambium, and ground meristem, right? Those are primary meristems. And those primary meristems are going to give rise to those primary tissues that we talked about in a previous class. Yes. So it's just showing you primary growth. I don't need to, yeah, this slide will be useful when you do the lab, especially. But it's good to also put a location to where all this growth is occurring. This is showing you those same things occurring, but at the root level, right? So the root level has an apical meristem. Here, let me move this chat box. Can't see anything here. Here's that root apical meristem, and that root apical meristem, as it divides, is going to give rise to those same 3 primary meristems that are then going to give rise to the primary tissues that we talked about in that other class. Oh, or here you go. Here you go. This is a recall slide from that other lecture, just to show you those things that we've already covered. Let's see, we got here, I just want to see, oops. Yeah, we'll finish. We'll finish. Cool. So primary tissue, all right, so apical meristem divides into those primary meristems. Primary meristems further divide into the primary tissues: epidermis, ground tissues, and vascular tissues. We're going to look at the primary tissues in angiosperms, a lot of similar players to what we've seen before, right? You got stomatal apparatuses or apparati. Here you go. Here's one. Here's one stomatal apparatus, right? Guard cells on the outside, stoma or hole in the middle. And then each of these wiggly guys here, I'm drawing it, is an epidermal cell, which would have a cuticle. Those the shape of the epidermal cells will vary slightly depending on species. Then your ground tissues, and so we've never really talked about this too much before, but just so you know, there's other, so in the ground tissues, in the past we've said like cortex and pith, right? Cortex and pith. But cortex and pith are made up of cells. And if there's a bunch of the cells together, we could even call them tissues. But these are some of the cell types, and you may have seen these words in lab before. And if you haven't, then you probably will be seeing them in lab. But you have parenchyma. So just so you know, when you see this prefix here, chyma, some people say chyma, which I think is totally fine, but I say chyma. So you can say parenchyma if you want, but I think parenchyma is easier to say. That cell type does photosynthesis and also stores starch. Then you have parenchyma, which is a supporting tissue, and sclerenchyma, which are basically fiber cells. And sclerenchyma cells, or when you have a bunch of those cells, sclerenchyma tissue is the second most abundant plant polymer after cellulose. So it has applications, but you will probably see these terms in lab when you're doing the diagrams for stem cross sections. These may be terms that it asks you to identify on diagrams. Okay. And then primary xylem and primary phloem are your other primary tissues, and we'll talk more about them next week, but basically there are two types of cells for both. In primary xylem, you have vessel element cells and fiber cells, and then in primary phloem, you have sieve tube element cells and companion cells. But we will talk more about that. It says next week, but I think it actually is going to be on Thursday. Okay, so flower. So I said that there's male structures and female structures. Male structures are androcium or stamens. Female structures are gynocium or pistil/carpels, right? Oh my gosh, all these words. Any of these words means the exact same thing. So you can decide what you like better and go with that. Let's go through the parts of a flower, so you guys know what it looks like. Some of this may be something that you covered even in elementary school, but so maybe some of this will sound familiar to you, maybe not. So here's a flower and the parts. So you have the pistil, aka carpels, aka gynocium, which is composed of three things: a stigma, a style, and an ovary. And we'll go through these, I think. Yes, we'll go through these things in more detail, but let's just look at the whole flower first. So pistil, I'll go with dark blue. A pistil with your stigma, style, and ovary, that's located here. Then you have stamens, which are made up of an anther and a filament. So stamen, anther, and a filament, and those are these things. There's two more over here. Petals, which you're probably the most familiar with, right? The colorful things that are toward the outside of a flower. And then lastly, sepals, which, I don't know if you've ever bought a rose. This is probably the best example. You know, if you buy a rose and it's still kind of fresh and it's closed up, and underneath the rose, there's like those little green leaves kind of at the base of the rose. Those are the sepals. So those are part of the flower sepal. So those are the parts. And what I want you to notice with this slide is that, so this and the following slide are the arrangement of these things, right? So the pistil occurs in the middle, followed by the stamens, followed by the petals, followed by the sepals. So from the center of the flower outward, you have pistil, stamens, petals, sepals. And what we do is we call those parts whorls. So the parts of a flower are arranged in whorls, or circles, So on the left here is a diagram of a flower, longitudinal section, similar to what we saw on the previous page, right? So like pistil is in the middle. Next you have the stamens. Next you have the petals. And next you have the sepals on the outside, right? But if you were to do a cross section through the flower, you could see the whorls better. You could see the whorls better. So I'll show you here, right? So like here's the red, here is the pistil. Blue is stamens. Pink is petals. Green is sepals. And so if you do a cross section, here I'll just do circles actually. You'll see these whorls. So here's a whorl for the pistil. Here's a whorl for the stamens. A whorl for the petals. And a whorl for the sepals. So 4 circles or 4 whorls inside of flowers. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because not all flowers or not all species make flowers that have all these whorls. And so knowing the names of these whorls helps you talk about flowers more completely. All right, this is just another drawing of a flower to tell you what the functions of these different parts are. So first we talk about pistil, or the female structures. Pistil has on it a stigma, a style, and an ovary. Those are the parts. What do they do? Well, the stigma, it's hard to see in this drawing, but the stigma is right here. It's this little dot right there. It's hard to see, but you'll see it better on a different drawing. But the stigma's job is to catch pollen. I guess black is not a good choice to use on this particular slide. Here, and here I used, what did I use? Red on the previous. Here's a stigma. Stigma catches pollen. I say like sticky stigma because it catches the pollen and it is sticky. Then you have the style, which is a tube that extends out of the flower to put the stigma out into the world. And then an ovary, which is a little difficult to see down, but it's down here. And inside of that ovary will be ovules. So those are the female parts. Right. As I was saying, you could also call it gynosium, that's fine, but I like pistil. And then you have the male parts, which are called the stamens. They are composed of the anther and the filament. The anther, which is that little hot dog looking thing right here, is where pollen is made. And the filament is just this long stalk that holds the anther out of the flower. And you can call these stamens an androecium if you want. Petals, as I said, are probably the thing you're most familiar with in terms of a flower. They tend to be very colorful. They tend to attract pollinators. This is not a great example plant here because the petals and sepals look very similar on lilies, but trust me that right here is a petal. Right here is a petal. This will become more clear on other flowers that we look at. All the petals together are called a corolla, which is a word meaning crown. And then the sepals, which again on this particular flower don't look very different from the petals, but trust me, these other things here are sepals. You can actually see the sepals really well here on that flower bud, because the sepals are that outermost whorl, right? That outermost circle. And so when the flower is closed, you'll see the sepals. The sepals are going to be the first thing to open, then the petals, then the stamens, then the pistil will be exposed. But remember, I said when you get a rose, like the little green leaves that are at the base of the rose, that's sepals. So all the petals together are called a corolla. All the sepals together are called a calyx. Calyx. All right, so I told you that there's parts of a flower. I told you that the flowers have parts that are arranged in whorls. And I told you that some plants have flowers that don't have all 4 whorls, right? If you're a plant that makes flowers that have all 4 of these things, you're called a complete flower. Complete flower. Let's use, I don't know. Let's use this purple color. So complete flowers have all 4 whorls. Complete flowers have pistils, stamens, petals, and sepals. All 4 whorls. So if we were to look at this flower below, right? In the middle, oh, that's not going to be good. Let's use bright green. In the middle, you have your pistil, right? With your stigma, style, and ovary. Surrounding that pistil is the stamens. Here is one stamen, right? But there's a whole bunch of them. Surrounding the pistil, they're made up of anthers and filaments. And then this flower also has petals. In this case, there are these pink things. And then it has also sepals at the bottom. So this flower has all 4 whorls. This flower is complete flower, all 4 whorls. And so if you don't have all 4 whorls, you are called incomplete flower. So you can be missing even just one whorl, and you're called incomplete, or maybe you're missing many whorls. So this, for example, this flower below doesn't have true petals. It has sepals that kind of look like petals. There's better examples of this, but this suffices it to say that if you're missing a whorl, so if you don't have petals, or you don't have pistil, or you don't have stamens or sepals, you're incomplete flower, missing a whorl, 1 or more whorls. So you have complete and incomplete, which deal with whorls, circles. But then you have perfect and imperfect, which deal with sex organs. There's 2 separate things. If you're a perfect flower, you have both sex organs on the flower, male and female sex organs, or stamens and pistils. And if you're an imperfect flower, you have only one or the other. So if you are, so keep that, I'll just make this again, because people get this confused. Complete versus incomplete refers to whorls. Whereas perfect versus imperfect refers to sex structures. 2 separate things. This is how I recommend that you categorize it in your brain, right? Complete versus incomplete deals with number of whorls. Perfect versus imperfect deals with sex structures. So Brittany's saying imperfect flower sounds like an incomplete flower. It's missing a whorl, right? One of the sex organs. Correct. So, however, so that's true. If a flower is missing either the male or the female sex structures, that flower is imperfect. And since it's missing a whorl, the flower is also incomplete. Correct. However, you might be a flower. Let's say you're a flower that's missing. Let's say that you're a flower that's missing the sepals, right? But you still have the pistil and you still have the stamens. In that case, that flower would be incomplete because it's missing the sepals, but it would still be perfect because it has both sex structures. So that's why I'm making a big deal about this. Complete versus incomplete deals with whorls. Perfect versus imperfect deals with sex structures. Good question though, really good. Because it especially today when we're first learning these terms, it's kind of can get a little confusing in that way. So I'll just show you real quick here, right? On these are some begonia flowers. Oh yeah, so perfect flowers have both sex structures. Imperfect flowers are missing one or the other. And if you have flowers that only have male parts, we can call it staminate. And if you have flowers that only have female parts, we can call it pistillate or carpellate, either one. Yes. So let this just sink in for today, because we're going to talk about complete and incomplete and perfect and imperfect flowers next class as well. But I just wanted to kind of give you a crash course, introduce you to the flowering plants, tell you where they live, tell you what types of habits they have, talk about the flower, what parts of the flower, and different types of flowers. We'll talk about this a bunch more in the next classes. Ben, which is more common, pistillate or carpellate? I don't know, honestly. What do you, so, well, oh, like what's a more, I see. What do people use more often? Probably carpellate, honestly, but to me they're interchangeable. It's like tomato for me, pistillate or carpellate. It really it really depends on. Botanists are weird. Like they have like likes and dislikes, and I think carpellate is probably the more common because a lot of times we talk about flower carpels and like number of carpels and things like that. I like pistillate, but they're both the same thing. They're both the same thing. All right. So that's it for today. Next class, we're going to keep talking about the flowering plants. We're going to talk a bit more about growth, my favorite topic, primary and secondary growth. We will get introduced to monocots and eudicots and talk about reproduction, megasporogenesis, and microsporogenesis. A reminder that next class, sorry, the class after that, right, a week from today, you have your lab exam, or sorry, you have your second lecture exam a week from today. So study guide has been on Blackboard since the 1st. Go on it, look at it. If you have questions about anything, send me an email. Yeah, and if anyone has a question right now, I'm happy to answer it. Otherwise, have a great day, and I will see you guys on Thursday. Bye, guys. Email me if you have questions. Good luck studying. You're gonna do well. Come on, I believe in you. All right. Bye, guys.